Hello and welcome. I am Cameron Starnes. Welcome to Step 3 Consulting and our Friday podcast. I am so excited. If you're watching us live or you're watching us on the replay, we are glad to have you. Today is going to be a very exciting day. I'm excited to have our guest here. So let's get started. Well, I have to tell you that I have been excited all week about this interview. I knew about Kristen before I even saw her face or had even seen her, because people said when I started speaking, they said, you've got to know Kristin Scroggin. She is amazing. People told me who had her public speaking course at UAH. People who had heard her speak said, oh, this is the person you have to talk to. So let me give her a true introduction. She tells me that she can't bake a pie and she can't do math. But what she does know is generational diversity. And she speaks on that all across the country. She has been a speaker at more than 100 different conferences and 250 organizations all across the United States. I'm really not sure how I was able to get her to this little podcast, but I am grateful and thankful. She has a degree in arts communication, and she has a master's degree in communication studies. So she should know how to communicate, right? She is a rock star herself, and she says that what she really is interested in is keeping and helping companies attract, develop, and retain Rockstar Millennials and Gen Z talent. She's obsessed with travel, which I love, and desperate to see the world. She says her and her husband are trying to keep their 4 children alive and their heads above water, which I also can relate to. So let's not waste any more time. Please let us know that you're here, and let's welcome Kristin Scroggin to our podcast. Did I say it right?
Good morning or afternoon or wherever it is when you're listening.
Yes. Welcome. We are so glad to have you on this Friday at lunchtime.
I'm excited to be here. I am coming to you from Denver, where my plane has gotten stuck, which is part of the glamorous part of being a public speaker, but it's all good. I'm excited, and we're gonna learn a little bit about generational diversity and whatever else you want to talk about today, Cameron.
That is awesome. I was in Denver at a trade show 2020. That was the last travel I was at when I was speaking on R&D tax credits all across the country, and it was March. And everybody was leaving, and everybody was like, I think they're going to close the world down. And I was like, really?
They did indeed, though, didn't they? They
did. No, it's like 2020. And I remember when everybody was like, oh, by summer it'll be fine. Like the sun was going to burn it off. Remember that? It's just going to be fine. So I have to admit, being that I'm kind of, I don't really know. I mean, I know there's boomers, and that's my parents.
Right.
But after that, kind of lost.
Okay, sure. So let me kind of break it down to you. So when we look at the oldest generation that we really talk about a lot right now, we call them traditionalists. And those are people born between 1924 and 1945. And really what I do in my company is I look at many generations. So when you think about generational diversity, what you're doing is you're looking at 2 things. You're looking at what the parenting trend was, right? So you think about there being a trend, it's usually in decade spans, like the Pinterest mom or the helicopter parent, right? So we look at that. And then the second half that we look at is what was the collective memory of people during their childhood. So, for example, I'm guessing me and you are going to be like 80s babies or 90s babies. So what we do is we look at during formative years. Very nice. During your formative years, ages 1 to 12, what was going on in economics, what was happening with leadership, who were the presidents, what was going on in music, movies. That gives you a collective viewpoint that you bring into the world from then on. So we look at these two things, parenting trends, and then what your collective experience was. And we see that looking at it in a micro generation is a much more effective way to do it. Because let's talk about the baby boomers you were just talking about. Boomers, the first half of that, those people would have been children during the 1950s, and the second half would have been children during the 1960s. Well, did the United States look the same in the 50s as it did in the 60s? Nope, not remotely. So this is the problem, is many people lump these groups together in just 20-year spans, and it doesn't really give you an accurate depiction. So I think that's part of what sets my stuff apart and why people resonate with it more, is because I'm looking more at the micro generations and how we look at things. So traditionalists are the oldest group. Those are going to be your Great Depression babies, and your the second half of that is going to be World War II babies. And then you have your baby boomers and the flower children, all right, the 50s and the 60s. And then you've got Gen Xers. Those would be people in their 50s right now. And then Zennials, that's us in the 40s. The best way you can remember if you're a Zennial or not, yet. That's the thing.
Hold on, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty there, Miss Kristen. We can't hear you too well.
You got me yet?
You're frozen in time.
Right.
It'll be terrible if I have to speak on this.
We were trying for a while too. See if I can.
Oh, there we go. She's
if
moving.
I change this way, is it different?
Yay! There she is.
Am I better like this?
Yes. So
Am I better like this now?
Yes, Zennials are 40-year-olds.
Yes, they're the post-Star Wars babies. So anything that happened after Star Wars, or the other way you describe it is like the AOL disc, right? If you remember getting an AOL disc in the mail when you were a teenager, then you're probably a Zennial. And then you go to the Millennials, which is unfortunately the most hated generation in the history of the world. And it's not their fault. The first half of that generation is called the Millennials, and they're what we say from 85 to 95 is really the core of the Millennials. And then the second half of that generation is what we call Gen Z, which you're hearing a lot about now. That's your new people coming into the workplace. So, and then the youngest ones right now, we don't really talk about because it's illegal to hire them. So,
I'm using them at my house. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't hire them, but I am
wondering, I think like boomers, baby boomer, maybe, it was a baby boom. And then why did we just start getting letters? I feel like I want something more exciting.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we get a letter until a generation begins collectively calling themselves by name. They have to have a collective identity. So it always is a letter. Even the boomers had a letter before they started calling themselves boomers. And then, you know why Gen X is still called Gen X? Because they're the least collective group of people in the world. Like, they don't give a crap what you call them. Like, they're not collective. They're like, write my paycheck. I don't care what you call me.
Whatever.
So, and then so Zennials gave themselves their name to differentiate. Millennials gave themselves their name to differentiate. And then Gen Zs actually went down and stole the name of their little brother because they so didn't want to be associated with the name millennial, because we've used it like a bad word for so long. So that's, normally they would have a totally different name by now, but they went and stole their little brother's name to try to set themselves apart. So yeah. So they'll keep calling themselves Gen Zs because they named themselves that.
That is funny. So what are some of, I know this because I'm a avid follower of you. If you do not follow Kristen on especially LinkedIn, I'm going to find it here. Amazing stuff. It's not hard to find her just by her name. There's a lot of them. So I know a little bit of this, but share with our audience, what are the misconceptions of millennials? I think they come, lazy. They don't want to work. I think those are things people say
all the time, and it's not remotely true. I think the reason that people have problems with millennials is because millennials are not afraid to stand up to you or to stand up to the status quo. And, we all feel like, I call my presentation Generation Them, which is sort of the idea that everyone else has messed it up, that we're the ones who did it right, and everyone else has been messing it up ever since then. And I think millennials get a lot of that bad rap because they do. They've been challenged. They challenge other people to explain why they do the things that they do. But I love millennials predominantly because they are so adaptable. They've had change continuously their whole entire life. Like any millennial who is listening to this right now, if you ask them what their first social media was, it was probably MySpace. And you can't even find that anymore. Like every toy they got is no longer in existence. You can't find their first level of iPhone. So they've had to continuously adapt, and they've had the Great Recession, and then they've had the COVID. Like they're just so adaptable. And so you really can't have a better group of people going into the workplace now in a post-COVID world, which is basically rewriting what the next 80 years of work is going to look like. There's nobody we could wish for better than the millennials because they are so adaptable and they're willing to throw out things that are no longer serving us. But, older generations, we don't like that. We don't like to be challenged. We feel like we put in our time and listen to our elders, and they should do the same thing. And, they very rightly say, but if our elders are spouting nonsense, then why should we listen to that? So I dig them. I really like the millennials. And I think they're going to be amazing, especially in the next 10 years as they move into upper and middle management. And I'm excited to see what they do in a newly invented world.
What a great positivity. And I have to think a lot of times I caught myself, I'm 46. I try to forget sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it's 43, 45. I caught myself saying, like, these kids, I just don't understand them or something, something like that. And then I thought, oh my God, that is what old people say. Like, I was like, and, I remember my grandparents saying about my parents, like, oh, they, y'all have too many toys, or, back in my day. Mm-hmm. And then isn't it sort of just the rite of passage that whatever older generation thinks the next generation is ruining it? I remember when y'all get to be adults, I don't know what we're going to do.
Right. Oh, well, I'm sure that people, when the telephone came out, that all those letter writers were running around about to die, and then the TV came out and the radio came out, and everybody's been, whoops, you got me still. Everybody's been freaking out ever since then, so everyone always thinks it's going to be different.
I think change is always scary, right? Anytime something is different, it's always scary. It's always scary. You can also catch Kristen on her Instagram at Genwhy Communications, just for a check. So, Gen Z. So, you said they forward thinking. Just gonna go get their own name again. 95, born 95 and above, right?
Well, Gen Z is going to be from 1996 to 2005. So they're our babies. So you think about 16-year-olds till 25, 26-year-olds. But that's a lot of what's coming into the workplace right now, and they are rattling cages here too. But you have to remember, millennials were mostly raised by flower children. They were raised by people that, were raised in the 60s. But Gen Zs were mostly raised by Gen Xers, so people raised in the 70s. So that's going to be really, really different how they look at the world. And we do see already some big differences in our Generation Zs. They seem to be a lot more independent, less reliant on their parents in the same way. But they're really, really obsessed with their cell phones and overly dependent on them. And everything's a lot about being on trend, making sure that you're doing the same thing as everyone else. You wear the same shoes, you drink the same drink, you listen to the same influencers. And that's very not millennials. Millennials were all about be as independent as possible, right? Be a hipster in this, be as nothing but independent music. So you kind of see that pendulum swings over and over and over again.
Yes, it does. It does. They are. I'm thinking about my own children who both meet that, and the phone, very attached to that phone.
Very tight. And it's not going to get less so. So it's funny because I work with companies and they'll be like, well, we're just going to make them take all their phones and put them in a basket during our meetings. And I'm like, okay, well, they're just going to take all your oxygen away then. Because it's basically the same thing. You know, they can't live without that. They have like a physical dependency on it. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just, it's how you see it. If you see it as being dismissed when someone gets out their phone, if you perceive it that way, then you know that's what it is to you, but it's not what it is to them. 9 times out of 10, when a Gen Zs pull out their cell phone, it's because you've just told them a date that they need to put into their calendar. It's not because they're bored with what your content is. So a lot of it has to do with where your mind space is and how you see these changes and how they impact your ego. And how you feel about people.
Very nice. I do think that, and I think they are more rapidly checking that out or tabbing that, or, oh, they said this, I want to remember. Everything moves at this very rapid pace. I saw Simon Sinek as my hero.
He's great.
Isn't he really? And he was explaining a lot of this in a podcast that I watched, and he was saying how much pressure there is when you have been raised in constant what you look like, what you say, always, you know, we didn't have that. Thank God it wasn't all in camera and all, and that there's a lot of pressure with that, and you're on top, you're fine, you're good, and then you're down, and
you're not supposed to show anyone that you're down. You're only supposed to show people that you're good and that you're always on vacation and that life is fantastic, and don't ever admit that anything's wrong.
Oh my!
It's a lot of pressure on a human
being. Facebook facade, as I call it, which they don't even get on Facebook. My kids tell me, "Oh, it's for moms. It's for soccer moms." Please.
Yes, it is. Well, and for those of you that are listening who are leading this generation, one of the things that you'll notice about them is that they're very risk averse. They're not good at going out and trying new things. They're much better at, you tell them to do this, you tell them exactly how to do this, you give them a tools list, you assess them, you tell them ahead of time with a rubric what it's going to be. They're used to everything being sort of all the way laid out. So it's interesting because they won't just like try it. They won't just go, like, as a Gen Xer, you are these kind of people where it's like, just go blow it up, right? You ask for forgiveness. You don't ask for permission. That is not this generation at all. They're going to come and interrupt you over and over and over and over again to get permission to move on to the next thing because they are so risk averse. They don't want to do it wrong and have to repeat things. So they have a tendency to interrupt you more often. So I found overwhelmingly, if you really want to get these people in a good spot, number one, give them more checklists when you're onboarding them and tasks. Give them checklists. As a Gen Xer, right, Cameron? You and I, if they gave me a checklist at work, I would quit. I would be like, how dare you micromanage me like this? But all these Gen Zs are like, please, for the love of all things holy, give me a checklist of what you want me to do. So checklists are great for them. They love it. And that's not going anywhere. That's going to continue to be a thing through the Gen Alphas. And then, so checklist is one of the good things. And then make sure that you're having regular feedback sessions. So make sure and that you're empowering them, that you're saying like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done right now.
Wow.
And empower them to take those risks.
Yeah, because they have been under a microscope. It's like Truman Show.
They've
exactly been under a microscope.
And that's why they will wait until a project is completely blown up before they come and tell anybody that anything's gone wrong, because they're so freaked out by not having it all together or not knowing everything or the perception of that. And so so what'll happen is this is part of why they ghost all the time, right? Like I hear companies all the time that'll say like, I had no clue that my Gen Z was unhappy at work. And then all of a sudden they gave a 2 weeks notice and they were gone. Well, they're freaked out about letting you know that anything is wrong and it being a scene. They don't want a scene. They don't want drama. Don't forget, this is also the generation that's never lived in a world without Sandy Hook school shootings. So they're used to things getting very big, very fast, and they don't want it. So they're more likely to lie low. And that's part of why they, instead of telling you, no, I don't want to take the job, they just ghost the next interview. Or they just don't tell you when things are about to go wrong, or they just quit when things aren't perfect in the office. They don't want to seem.
Wow.
Weird,
do you find, because I was reading over some of your information, I think, if I'm not, now correct me if I'm wrong, that you are also disc, the disc.
Yes, I do know the disc. Mm-hmm.
The way that I do. And that's usually what I talk to people about their personality, behavior, style, not generational. Do you find, because I'm fascinated by this, how do you find, so say that I'm in this Gen Z, but I'm a high DI, obviously. Mm-hmm. And no C. And for those of you who don't know, like a C would like your accountant, very, very cautious, very concerned. And S, I have S and C children because God, that'd be funny. And I'm DI, just fast. I don't care about risk, blah, blah, blah. So if a person in this generation falls into that fast moving, dreamer, let's do it personality style, but in an age group that is adverse, how does that play out?
So the way that I describe it is that everyone has a unique prescription that they look through the world through. So you have all these different layers in your glasses, your lenses that you see the world through. You have your personality, you have your generation, you have your race, your gender, how much money you were raised with, your birth order, religion, politics. All of these things form your unique prescription. And the problem is that we all walk around forgetting that everyone else has a different prescription than we do. So we see the world through our lens, and then we talk to someone and we're like, how can you not possibly see this? So to me, personality and generations are actually very same. The only way you get better negotiating conflict with one of those issues is if you understand it. That's why awareness is the important thing. In personality, when you understand someone is a hard type D, right? Then you realize that they're not trying to hurt your feelings. They're not out to make you sad. They're just all about task accomplishment. Same thing here when you look at a Gen Z now and you say, oh, this person's risk averse. Now your brain says, oh, it's not because they're trying to get out of work because they're lazy. It's because they're afraid to make a mistake without somebody above them signing off on it. When you learn those different things, then you spend less time being mad and hating your job. So that's sort of why we learn this, right? Like that's the importance behind any diversity, equity, and inclusion is exactly what we're talking about, is learning the different lenses so that when you have a conflict with someone, you can potentially work your way out of it. So the thing is that in each one of these generations, just like you say, you are going to have a DISC, or what I say is you're always, in this generation, you're going to have a Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin, right? You're going to have, because they understand that, you're going to have these different divisions of personality that are going to come out there. What's going to happen, though, is when we look at generations, we look at the overall, just like you do with personality. We cast a wide net and we look for majorities. So whenever you would have somebody that was like a super crazy high D, they would probably now fall into an outlier characteristic, an outlier category. And they would usually associate more with people older or that are more like their type. So this is how we get people who are old souls, right? So they're 27 and they really like knitting and brandy, and they'd much rather hang out with people in their 40s. And it's because they're so high on their extremes on personalities or lifestyle or whatever it is that it kind of makes them gravitate or think up. So so you're still going to keep those different things. But what happens is now, like you were talking about, in a very safe group, right, with Gen Zs, now when someone is a young person and they are very super go-getter, take chances, what happens is they become an extreme outlier, or they would call them influencers, right? You look now at those people who are main creatives and you say, they're so out there, I can only observe them. They're not like other people in my age group. They're so far. So like you think about with millennials, they were saying that was Zuckerberg, right? He was so far in the extreme of his generation that he became the ideal, but nobody in that group actually went up to that. Very rare would people go up to that particular level. Same thing here with Gen Zs. We just look at people who are in the extremes and go, oh, we'll just observe them and take little parts of their personality that we like. But most of us are going to play it safe, be little worker bees, do what people tell us to do.
You are amazing. I love talking. I love it. Because I am a nerd for people and how they work. And I tell people all the time, I think this is the greatest work. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I'm sure there's Mother Teresa or something. Well, right after Mother Teresa, Kristen, there's Mother Teresa, then there's us. But, and I know you can say the same. We can put the slides up there and we can tell people your company will make more money. I mean, there's statistics to show it every day. I can tell you how that if you work on communication, if you work on the people, if you work on conflict resolution, if you have a communicator come in your office, you will win more bids. You will have more retention of your employees. You will keep people. You have better culture. Blah, 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 blah. But I do it because I want more love in the world.
I feel like that is my economic contribution, is to help you keep more good people. Hire and keep more good people.
Yeah, I my motivator, and I love that. I have this motivator. It's not money. It is impacting the world. And I mean, I guess corny, whatever, like, but if we could, you brought up Columbine, and I thought so much about this morning. I'm Episcopalian. The Episcopalian Church in Birmingham was a shooting. And I just cried this morning, and I thought, why? What is wrong with it? What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? That is, people are sending hearts now, that we just, and I believe it starts with understanding, whether that is understanding, someone was raised different than you. And I tell people in speeches all the time, like, everybody ain't like you. Everybody is not like you. And I love that you're talking about the lens, because everybody's looking at life through a lens. And I every time I talk, I say, if you take nothing away from this, no, everybody's walking a walk that you have no idea about. I don't care what they look like on Facebook, TikTok. Oh, la, la, la. Yeah, they all were screaming at each other before they got on that picture. Right? And just having you explain that and, thinking, these kids are lazy, or these kids are this or that. And then thinking, well, how about if you lived your whole life under a microscope? You and me were just going out. I mean, I just ball games and whatever, and band and bus rides and doing whatever.
There's no pictures of me in college posted forever online with a solo cup. It's not, that didn't happen for me.
Nothing.
I can deny it all. Complete plausibility.
Everything you do.
And don't forget about this. Not only do you not have to post the picture, but now someone else that maybe doesn't have your best interest at heart can post that picture.
And a snippet. Just the right snippet and the right thing and the right, just everything. Okay, so we just have a couple minutes left, and thank you. Thank you for your work. I want to talk about, and we can go over a little bit, because I'm the CEO. That's what I tell people. I own this podcast. I want to talk about public speaking. You and I love public speaking. We just think, but the majority of the world apparently would rather die than get up and public speak.
Yeah, it's called glossophobia. It's the number one fear in the world is glossophobia. More people would rather be in the coffin than be the person giving the eulogy. So I've been teaching public speaking for the past 15 years, and I love it. I teach at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, great school, and I love teaching this. And it is so fun to me to take these students, because really I've taught the whole front end, and now as much of the Gen Zs as are in college. It's part of why I can research them. It's so fun to take people that have 100% convinced themselves they cannot do that and teach them a skill, and then watch how it influences everything about their self-perception. When you give people hard things to do and then they overcome them, that's where real self-esteem comes from. And that's a lot of what public speaking really is about challenging yourself to do something that's maybe not natural for you. So one of the things that I would say is I've designed an online class for adults to learn how to improve their public speaking, because it can give you a huge advantage in the workplace. If you're really looking to level a playing field at this point in time, the ability to speak and speak well is a major jump. It's a smart investment for you to make in your career, because so few people can do it. very rarely, I mean, people just won't, or they're absolutely garbage at it. And so people don't love their project, or they don't fall in love with the idea because it hasn't been presented in a way that make people want to take action. So a lot of my public speaking class is about learning how to do that. It's called Fearless Public Speaking. And the idea is I walk you through all the different things, because public speaking, Cameron, you know this is true. Public speaking is a skill, not a talent. If you know all the steps that you're supposed to do, it has nothing to do with your personality or how nervous you are. If you learn the little skills and you understand how to do open flat hand gestures and how to do facial expressions correctly and how to organize for maximum retention, that's what makes you a good public speaker. And so that's basically what the class does. It gives you the opportunity to learn what those skills are so that you can begin implementing them and up your game. I mean, we see that people who are good public speakers are 15% more likely to be promoted, and they make on average 10% higher salaries. People who we're not talking about professional public speakers. We're just talking about good, right? So it's a huge way for you to up your game. If you want to learn more about that, I think she just showed you my website, genwhy.com. And you can learn more about my Fearless Public Speaking. And if you go to that website, there is a little pop-up that'll take you to a free mini class that I have on 5 ways for you to improve your public speaking today. And you can go check that out. But yeah, if you want to be a better public speaker, I can help you there. If you want to know a lot more about generational diversity, I can help you there. If you want to talk about conflict resolution or why people don't listen well, everything's there on the site at genwhy.com.
We are so excited. Thank you so much. I feel that we packed so much in here. Please reach out to Kristen. She's a wonderful resource. We thank you for being here and helping us understand a little bit more about people. And
Absolutely.
As my favorite quote from Simon says, employees are people, customers are people, 100% of your business people are people. If you don't understand people, you don't understand business. So we thank you for being here, and we thank you that watch, and we thank you that are on the replay. Please join us next Friday, same time, same channel, where we are going to talk to my good friend and realtor, the team lead for RE/MAX Key Finders Group, Blake Landry, will be here to join us next Friday. Super excited about that. Talk about all the things going on right now, which there are lots, and we look forward to that. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend and be kind.